Good morning, perhaps good afternoon or good evening, sea wolves, depending on where you're watching this. I hope you're ready for a great show. We're going to look today at the route to come. So from here, Cape Horn, all the way to the finish, and the different challenges that the sailors may or may not run into. And of course, we're going to look at everything that happened in the last 24 hours, which is a lot. But before we do all that, let's first get to my favorite part of the morning. I hope that you have something delicious here. 7-minute brewed, as you guys invite me. I'm really becoming a rock steady fan of this particular principle. Here we go. Are we ready, sea wolves? Are we ready? 3, 2, and 1, and here we go. Ooh, very nice, very nice. Beautiful, huh? Those albatrosses, wow. I mean, that must be quite a feeling to have that zooming around the boat. And yeah, now that we're on the subject of Boris, so last night Mr. Hermann unfortunately damaged his mainsail during a jibe.
30 to 40 knots of wind. Up, I damaged the mainsail. Doing a repair job there. See as what? I did a little jibe to go away from the continental shelf to avoid any breaking waves. And then I jibe back soon in half an hour. And I, damn it, can't put my mainsail. I damaged the jibe when I took a reef. Reef 3, the battens got under the shrouds and started flapping and so another slap in my face a bit, but it puts up my my fighting spirit. I will never give up. I lose mine, so it hurts. Many moments. But okay, I have to put another patch on the other side of the sail, and then I have to stitch the leech into it. Damn it! Anyway, Cap Horn. Yeah, we're there. But we won't see it. Too far south. It's too dangerous by this sea state to go on the shelf maybe. Or better not to, especially underpowered like this. Whew.
So I'm not exactly sure what the status of the mainsail is right now. He's obviously underpowered, and the conditions are so choppy and extreme, that he really isn't in a position to fix a rip in the mainsail right now. But I also don't know if it's a rip as in the whole sail is ripped through, and it's going to be kind of like Mr. Shirashi's problem, and it's going to take a lot of time to maybe or maybe not be able to fix it, or if it's a tear that was maybe about to go all through the sail but didn't really, and Boris was in time to lower it. I'm asking his team about it today, but as of right now they haven't gotten back to me yet, so hope to give you a more in-depth update on that tomorrow. Then for some news on Pip's situation, so she's still without a navigation of the autopilot based on the wind speed and her wind instrument, but apparently she was in some gusts of 50 knots and over, and that did knock loose her wind vane. So she does have a relative wind direction again, which is of course kind of half the paddle, because knowing the absolute wind is important, but ultimately you're sailing the boat on the on the relative wind, on the situation that you, relatively Einsteinian speaking, are in. So that's good that at least she has this data now and will be able to steer the boat a lot better on that. And not exactly sure if she's managed to have the autopilot also link into that. So really good news that probably on Friday I'll be talking to the technical director of Pip's team. We're still working out the details on that, and then we can really dig into this subject. So look forward to that, and more updates on that. So right now, not sure exactly to what extent she's able to get her autopilot to steer on relative wind, if it's only the direction and not wind speed and all these other things, because I think that's probably bundled up in the data. So when you set the autopilot to steering on wind, it takes of course the relative direction, but also the relative wind speed and all this info into account. And I don't know if our autopilot has the option to actually turn off kind of the wind meter, the speed data, and only take the direction as a data point, and then adjust the course based on that. So that's something that we're definitely going to ask over the next few days, and hopefully we'll find out. She did post a video, like a latest update, almost like an hour back now. So let's take a quick look at that.
So a little update for you, let you know how things are going on board, because it's been a tough 48 hours, and I know I've had a lot of messages of encouragement and support, and I want to thank everyone for all the great vibes that you're sending me. So basically two things have happened. I lost my wind data, and then this big weather system has caught us up behind, and it looks very much like we're going to be in this sort of weather all the way to the Horn. So at least another week of this sort of breeze. And through the night was very difficult. The wind is not stable at all. So sometimes it's 20 knots, sometimes it's 40 knots, and we've seen gusts of 50 knots. And I know this because I've been chatting with Alan on La Fabrique and Callie in La Micaline, who are in the same stretch of water as me, and they've been relaying me the scary wind information. Through the night I had a very, very difficult night because the ice limit is on our starboard side, so we're sort of sailing a downwind course next to the ice limit, and without any wind data I was just kind of having to guess where downwind was, and when we get a squall come, I'll bear away, but I'm having to guess how much to bear away by, just by listening to the boat, trying to feel the motion. It's not ideal, and it has been quite stressful. The emergency wind wand I will endeavour to fix. It's still on my job list, but I just have been overtaken by the weather, so no chance now. But I have had a little bit of luck in that the wind vane that was stuck at the top of the mast seems to have 50 knots, seems to have unstuck it, shall we say. So I now have an apparent wind angle. The wind speed isn't working, so I've got no true wind angle and no wind speed, but I do have an apparent wind angle that I can see down here, which halves my stress levels, which is incredible. Now I kind of knew that this last week coming into the Horn was going to be the most challenging yet, and it is. Everything is under stress and strain. I'm about to go on deck and check everything on deck. There's so much load in everything, there's so much load on me, and it's at a time we're coming into week 9 of the race, so it's tough. and I've been thinking a lot about what my objectives are for the next week, and how I feel about competing and all that sort of thing. And actually, I just need to reframe where I am, just reevaluate things. And my job in the next week is to sail a smart course, allowing for the restrictions that I have, and just keep Medallia in the best shape possible, keep myself in the best shape possible, just get to Cape Horn, get into the Atlantic, and then we can start sorting some stuff out. I'm feeling pretty good. I signed up for this. This is tough. There's a reason why fewer than 100 people have ever finished this race. It's incredibly tough. And I'm up for it. I'm up for it. I totally respect where I am, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. So I've finished feeling sorry for myself. The smile's back.
So very good to see that at least with this little bit of a good situation within a bad situation of having the relative wind again, that at least her spirits are up again. The smile, the famous, the by now very famous Pip smile is back. So that's very good to see, and I'm happy that she's doing all right. And so that's kind of it for the news today. One also very cool thing is that we actually broke apparently a record. So in the last 24 hours, 8 other skippers made it past Cape Horn, and that's apparently the most ever in 24 hours in the Vendee Globe. So that's kind of a cool record, and a real testament to the close competitiveness of the boats, that they are so close together. This whole leader pack of about 10-12 boats that are all kind of hurdled very closely together, all going past the Cape, of course, more or less at the same time. So very cool to see that that's actually a first. And yeah, it's very true, of course, that in the previous Vendee Globes, usually the spaces between the boats at this time in the race were days, right? They were like strewn all along, with maybe a few of them a little bit more closer together, of kind of racing and dueling against each other, but most of them just miles and miles and miles, often days apart. But in this particular case, I guess with the aid of modern weather routing, the satellites that we're using, etc., just like what we saw in the previous ocean race, we really see that all of these boats are getting much closer together, and that the tactics and the choices and all that stuff, it still matters a lot, but they have much more chances to make good on earlier mistakes. They have much more chances to catch systems later when they find out that maybe only half a day before the weather turns, and they can make a certain option to tag on to a weather system right in front of them and ride that. It's just very evident that all this type of options are really influencing the race, and with all the skippers optimizing for all of that, we see that those huge distances between boats, obviously it still happens, but mostly between the teams with, of course, much kind of older boats. I mean, most of the boats that are really far in the back are really the older generation boats, though we have a few of them that are more in the middle, but none of those really made it all the way to the front. But in the front we see a lot of the the really new boats and the modified older boats, let's say, both foiling and non-foiling, and they are just super competitive, which makes the race really cool. I think it's a real benefit to the race to have such close racing. It makes it much more exciting that we still have no idea if Yannick is actually going to make it and actually win this thing. And I guess that's a good bridge to kind of get into that. So we'll look at all the positions after, but let's take a look, just like we did all the way in the beginning when we looked at the entire race course, at the type of challenges that are still waiting for all the racers kind of once they've passed Cape Horn. So here we have the World and Cape Horn, where the sailors right now are passing by, with the Falkland Islands and the option to either go more inshore and kind of pass the Falkland Islands, on kind of the lee side, on the inside, which sometimes, seems like a shorter option and could be interesting, with usually, the different pressure systems a little bit more to the east here. That is sometimes a good idea. But in this particular case, we see that most of the sailors now have opted to take a route that is a little bit more towards the east. And we see that this first sort of system is of course a first thing that they're going to have to pass. And just like on the way over here, you can very clearly see here within the pressure lines, which are also kind of a stand-in for temperature lines, because different air pressure is actually also a factor of temperature, right? Rising and falling air depending on air temperature. And so we can see this, this kind of separation line, which is, right around actually the Cape Horn location, which explains, together with, of course, the current and the fact that we have water going over kind of a lip in the land where it gets a bit higher because these two land masses are connected, plus the fact that we have warmer air and colder air kind of colliding here. It's why we get a very misty, very stormy, very rainy, lots of thunderstorms, etc. situation around here. And that's going to persist. So for a while, as you can see, the system here is kind of, they're all going to be sailing kind of past the Falkland Islands, past this system here, trying to go not too far to the middle to lose the wind, but also not too far to the southeast, let's say, because that's going to mean a lot more miles. And then they're going to have to kind of find their way through all this. And as you can see, it looks like what we saw on the first passing of this, just after the start of the Vendee Globe, and on the way kind of in the other direction of the race, that there is just a lot of really chaotic and unusual, I would say, weather in the southern Atlantic right now. So where we usually, would have the kind of the Helena system here, which is just a giant gyrating high, basically, it's not really there, or for better word, it is obviously there, as shown by the pressure points, but it's not the more or less one relatively unified system, let's say, but it's kind of all over the place with seemingly kind of, small high pressure, low pressure, well, actually no low pressure areas right now, but a lot of small high pressure areas that are kind of spread all over the place, almost like, kind of a doldrum situation, which of course normally we see, much higher. But it looks kind of like that as far as the behavior, and has looked actually like that. I've checked, throughout the race here and there, like what the situation there was. And it just seems to be kind of the state of the Atlantic right now, that it seems just a little bit chaotic right now. And so it means that there, if you look at the weather right now, there isn't really, and I can switch to windy here, maybe to show the situation a little bit more clearly. We see this kind of high pressure areas kind of strewn and making lines through, where we might otherwise expect a much more unified kind of round system, nicely turning, providing, a good way through here, but it looks very chaotic. And so there's not really one a very clear path through. And if we look at the race lines right now, we clearly see the Dionic probably planning, as the weather progresses, to kind of keep sailing up here, and not the way that these predictions are predicting, but probably going, more north and kind of catching a system. But it's going to be so unpredictable, I think, that it's going to be very much a day to day. Like in this type of chaotic situation, like we saw on the way over, you can't really think even 2 days or 3 days ahead, because it's so versatile and just changing all the time, that it's about 24 hours, maybe 30, that they can look ahead and say, well, this is wind that I can definitely get. What we're going to do after that, maybe they have a few ideas, but it's so unpredictable that it's hard to really count on that. And so they're going to have to make a few guesses, let's say educated guesses. And that also means that because of this particular situation, there's a very good chance actually that we may see one of the leaders, Yannick or Charlie or Thomas, lose actually a lot of their current position due to just kind of bad weather routing choices, or maybe not even choices, but kind of misfortune, let's say. We see that a little bit with Thomas right now, who seems to be absolutely right in the middle, well, almost going into the middle of this high pressure area there. So right now, still relatively okay speed, but 10.5 knots, really a whole lot. While we're seeing Yannick actually having a 24-hour of about 16 knots, and I think, yeah, Charlie is actually doing 21 knots right now. So Thomas, most likely, at least right now, seems not in a very good place, and though the wind is going to turn more in his favor, as you can see, very much a little bit the luck of the draw, let's say, in that center. And the same goes as they go higher and higher. It seems that more or less until they get somewhere, yeah, I would say midway to Brazil or something, that only there the weather really stabilizes. So maybe Rio de Janeiro, slightly above Rio de Janeiro, there we see that we have more kind of stable weather and trade winds. But until that, it's just chaos everywhere, and there are lots of opportunities for the leaders to get stuck or have to slow down for a while the people in the back maybe will have good speed. So we could see still a lot of contractions, and the race is anything but over. Yannick has a great lead, 600 something miles to number 5, and with the rest all 100 or 200 miles ahead. So a genuine great lead, but it's not so hard for him. He only has to make 2, maybe 3 bad choices for Charlie or for Damien Seguin to be able to catch up a lot and maybe even make it all the way back to his position again. So that's what we're going to see for the next I guess week and a half maybe or so, maybe slightly over a week, depending a bit on the speed. I mean, this is an area that they could get through it in 4 days, 4.5 days maybe, if their speed was really all the way up. But looking at this particular weather, it could be 6 days, could also be 9 if they're especially unlucky. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Now then we get a nice area of trade winds that seem to be all pretty much in a good direction right now. So that should, and is historically also generally a very, very fast part. There can be, however, a lot of weed in the water here. So this is an area where we saw in the Volvo in the previous ocean race, I guess now also, that a lot of boats had a lot of trouble with the Seguin weed, which is a floating weed that can get around the keel, and that sometimes it's giant fields of it, and that can really slow boats down. And this particular area, because it's warm, relatively steady water, it just grows really well there. And in some seasons it's better, some is worse. But they're definitely going to need some of it, and we saw in the Volvo Ocean Race that several boats actually had to stop to get it off of their rudders, or off of various places where it can stick. And so that's probably a challenge that we're going to see the Vendee Globe sailors also kind of having to deal with, and especially the foilers, of course, could run into kind of an extra handicap there. Then we get, of course, back into the doldrums. So again, like I explained before, and if you want to have the whole explanation of the doldrums and the weather there, go back to my earlier video on the doldrums. But we see here, I'll go back to the Medio Earth map, that when we look at the doldrums, we see again that we have there kind of the middle between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere weather. And right where those two oppositely turning systems meet each other, we always get kind of a, let's call it a wall, more or less, of still air that kind of makes the separation between those two. And that wall can be quite wide, I mean hundreds of miles wide. It can also be sometimes only 10 or even not be there if you're lucky. But it has all kinds of weather properties that for sailors are very, very unfavorable, because you can get a lot of lightning storms, sudden rain, etc., sudden squalls around this area, but with relatively low wind. So you're not going anywhere, but you're stuck in a lightning storm. You know what I mean? And so, it's a particular area that's known really as the seventh circle of hell sometimes, and where, if you're especially unlucky, sailors can get stuck for a long time. However, The worst of it is usually here kind of off the landmass of Africa, because as you can see, you can see it quite nicely here, you know, in the visual, that you see the air kind of flowing off of the continent of Africa. So this is huge, very hot air that is heating up over the Sahara and then flows into the ocean, as you can see. And you can kind of see, if I zoom in a little bit, that on both sides of that you see kind of this more doldrum. Why? Because this air is super hot, and the air more to the north of that and the air more to the south of that is considerably colder. And so you kind of see the effect exaggerated, where you get two kind of tunnels between those two weather systems, with the hot air kind of flowing off the continent, and then as it flows past the islands and, you know, more into the ocean, it cools off a bit, and then much later you see that it starts to kind of mix more with the air around. But the reason you don't really see it mix with the air around, you see those two kind of air walls repel each other a little bit, is because the temperature between those two is so different. Because this is essentially air that's coming up, so it's colder air, and this is essentially air that's, you know, coming down, or some of it's going up depending on the temperature of it. But with that very hot Saharan airstream, it doesn't really mix, and that's why you get kind of zones of almost no wind right there. More towards the American continent, that's less so. So you sometimes also get it here as the wind kind of goes towards the land. But we saw that the sailors all got kind of stuck, you know, around the islands here and a little bit lower in those two zones that often have this behavior. But on the way back, they'll be more towards the west as far as their course goes. So the chance that they really get stuck in those particularly strong doldrum areas is a little bit less of a problem. However, what you can see that here, so a little bit more to the east, we also have kind of a long stretch that often has this type of weather. It's kind of the opposite side of this kind of more upper doldrum, but on the other side of the ocean. And they're not really going straight through there. They're going to pass more or less through the middle here. But it's where those two, you know, arms, let's say, of very problematic weather areas kind of come together. So they might pass where it's thinnest, where it's the lowest chance of really running into trouble, but they still might. And so that's the doldrums, and that's really, let's say, the penultimate challenge where real bad luck can become a huge problem. So you can do everything right. Yannick could do everything right, get all the way up to this point, and just be a brilliant navigator, be a brilliant sailor, keep his boat in one piece, and it'll just be all a dream sail. And then, through no fault of his own, get stuck in the doldrums for 5 days and see everybody sail past, you know, 3 miles that way, but just being stuck and impossible to get there. This can happen, right? And that's the real kind of leveler, what we've also seen on the way over when we saw so many boats break, and many of you, emailed or commented to say, why is this race so unfair? How can it be that all these boats are getting destroyed? Well, that's part of the race. That's like what Pip says. You sign up for there sometimes to be circumstances that will be unfair to you, that will make you pull the hair out of your head, where you go, well, I did so well, how can I have no wind now? I deserve wind, right? That's probably how they're going to be feeling. But it's just the reality of a race course that spans the globe, and you have to get through this. And it's always a mix of skill, but also a little bit Lady Fortune has to smile on you. So once they get through there, that's kind of the one before last challenge. And then of course we have the kind of the two upper cycles. And so first they're going to move through here, which is generally hard to predict, but it's also, like you can see, the center of it more or less here in the Northern Atlantic. We also have kind of normally a more or less circular system that's gyrating everything around that the sailors can follow. But similar to the Southern Atlantic, we see that it's somewhat disturbed. It's not very pronounced, and instead of a circular system right now, and I mean, we're still at least 2.5, 3 weeks away from being here, but you see that it's very oddly shaped, let's say. It's kind of all over the place with the wind going in different directions, or you might say it's kind of laying flat here, kind of at the altitude of Gibraltar. It's not really doing what it normally does, let's say, and the regular system seems to be much higher, kind of off of Ireland there. So we'll have to wait and see how that situation develops. But if they were coursing here right now, it would again be very difficult, because normally they can kind of sail here, let's say, and then make a course back downwards. But that's because this system is located quite a bit lower. But having it be quite a bit higher in location would make the road either much larger, with them having to go up much higher, or they'd have to kind of beat into this, which of course, so deep in the northern Atlantic with lots of wind is also not ideal. So I would say that as we look across the whole course right now, it looks like there's no exception to the race so far, in the sense that it looks very, very challenging and unusually, I would say, chaotic as far as weather goes. So weather is never predictable, but we've had, let's say, 20 years where we could see certain patterns repeat itself with fair regularity. There's always exceptions. Every year there's exceptions. I would say that the number of exceptions this edition is somewhat higher than before. On the other hand, we have lost less boats than in many other years. So in that sense, even though we had a lot of breakages, the fleet is doing fairly well with fairly few retirements in total right now. So that's kind of cool. And so that's the race course that we're still going to be passing so far. And now let's take a look at where everybody is in the race. So I kind of mentioned, of course, the situation of Yannick, of Charlie, of Thomas Rouillant, and of Damien, because all four of them have passed. They've made some distance. So Thomas especially is interesting because he made that choice to take a more eastern route and pass on the inside of the Falklands. And that may work out for him, it may not. If we look at the prediction, it seems good, but right now he's rather slow. And it's still going to be, I think, looks like at least the next 10, maybe 20 hours or so before he'll have good wind again. And don't look at this prediction lines because they're really all over the place. It doesn't seem like he's going to have real good real soon. On the other hand, if you do draw the line that Charlie is sailing right now, and assume that he's going to keep sailing in a straight line, then he of course will get stuck in a system where, if you look at this, he would of course never in a million years take this side of that system and would obviously go on the more west side. It's quite annoying actually that these kind of course lines that this app is now producing are so strangely off and just kind of became completely unsensical. But he definitely, both him and Yannick will later, as far as the prediction goes, run into this particular system with no real way to avoid it. So they'll get some lighter winds, and at that point Thomas will be quite significantly behind, but then he'll have faster wind again for a while. So about this, there's just not really too much very sensible to say, other than the whole thing is behaving very chaotically. And it's going to be a day-to-day, hour-by-hour matter of fighting their way through as they see different opportunities, riding squalls and riding, small weather systems here and there in order to get through. Then if we look a bit more to the back, so we see that this whole pack, like I said, the most boats ever in 24 hours past the Cape. So that's very nice to see. And everybody came through it more or less in good shape. So we have Isabelle Joschke still with keel problems, so still not able to cant her keel. And it looks like right now they're still in weather where there's simply no option to even attempt a repair. So some of you asked, like, what does that mean? Is it like swinging around, or what's happening? As far as I understand it, it means that her keel is just centered. So they do have the ability to let the keel kind of center, because they just take the, depower the ram, let's say, and let it find kind of its natural balance, and then can, reinforce it or put it stuck in that position. So she doesn't have the added benefit of the canting keel. But other than that, the boat still works normally. So she can't power up maybe fully, and she's missing the extra healing power of the fact that the keel can be canted. But other than that, she's basically racing, a fully modern boat just with a fixed keel, let's say. That's kind of what she's doing right now. So that'll give a definite disadvantage in the sense that she can't fully power up her boat if she wants to. On the other hand, should be relatively safe. While Ellen Rora, also still, dealing with the same problem, has oil all throughout his boat, and, probably also able to just fix the keel in the middle. But he has the added problem of just having a slippery, dirty, problematic boat, which I also discussed yesterday, of course, brings all kinds of risk. We see that she did fall back a little bit to 11th place, and same for Boris with his main sail. So yeah, really sad to see that you know, he fell back now to 10th, where he was, of course, for a while in 4th and 5th place, kind of battling with Jean. And for many of the Jean fans, you'll be as impressed as me to see that our man Leroy is doing excellent in position 7. So yeah, he's duking it out, and I do think, personally, I expect that over the next week or so, 7 or 8 days, it's going to be a real opportunity again for him to shine, because his boat definitely has a good advantage in this area where we have some periods with low wind, where he has no drag on his foils, and like we saw in the battle earlier with Boris, where he's just, if it's around, you know, 10, 11, 12 knots, 9 knots, 8 knots, in all those type of situations, Jean has a definite proven speed advantage with his boats, where he's just 2, sometimes 2.5, maybe even 3 knots faster than all of his fellow foiling boats who have the extra drag of the foils. And there's definitely going to be some light wind situations for, you know, some days as they go, you know, through the next 2 weeks, getting up to the trade winds. So he's definitely going to probably be able to gain a place, maybe 2, 3, just from that factor alone, if we look at what the weather's probably going to be. Then we add his extraordinarily clever strategy, which, you know, nobody knows what he's going to do, but I'm sure he's going to do something where all of us are going to go, wow, there, you know, Jean did it again, let's say. And of course, there's the fact that when he finishes, he still has that 16-hour time benefit, which, you know, more or less could ultimately have him win the race if he doesn't fall too far back from Yannick. And right now he's 739 miles behind. So, you know, 16 hours, that's, yeah, like that's a little bit more than 16 hours. So right now, and of course Yannick himself also has some extra allotted time. So right now, Yannick really, I think, in first position. But if that distance goes to half that distance, different story. If it goes less than half that distance, different story. If Jean makes it, I think, anywhere in the top 3, which is not unthinkable with all the odds and the different weather that's coming, and his proven upwind ability, because don't forget that there's going to be a good amount of upwind sailing also in this part, and his boat is definitely one of the fastest there, as we saw in the beginning of the race. So don't count out Jean Le Cam. He might very well win this race actually in the end, which in my mind would be maybe, you know, he might just be the best person ever to win this, right? I think that literally everybody in the world would, as we say in Holland, jump a hole in the sky. You know, we would all, I think, rejoice to see this fantastic sailor, you know, earn it in this particular way. So I wouldn't be against that at all. And I'm very curious to see how he's going to make it through. Then behind them, we see that Clarice Kramer actually had a fantastic rounding of Cape Horn. So congratulations to her. But also for the first time over the last 24 hours, actually outrunning Armel. So right now he's faster again with 15.7 over the last 4 hours, and she's on 14.7, so a full knot slower. But over the last 24 hours she's been doing 15.2, and Armel has only done 15. And we can also we do see it a little bit in the map here that she's gained a little bit of distance on them. On the other hand, Armel has taken a slightly shorter route, closer to the shore. So, but also may have, you know, more waves. And if I zoom in, you can see there's a little bit more lighter wind here right around the Cape, actually, as they go into the wind shadow of it. And he has the islands right in front of him, so that might slow him down quite a bit also. What I guess we'll see what happens there.
Salut à tous. Bon, j'espère que vous êtes en forme parce qu'ici c'est tonique, hein. Le Pacifique nous fait bien comprendre qui il est. Voilà, 600 000 du Cap Horn. Et avec une mer vraiment dégueulasse. On part dans des surfs à 29 nœuds. On plante dans une vague. On s'arrête à 13 nœuds. Voilà, là j'ai un peu réduit la toile parce que ça commence à être un peu chaud l'histoire. Voilà, plus que 600 000. 600 000, faut pas que le bateau lâche maintenant. Hein. Allez, bonne journée à tous. Ciao.
Now, yeah, so that'll be an interesting fight to see. Now, for the rest of the fleet, so that's basically Roman Atanasio, but also all of the sailors behind them who are still quite far. But you can see that they're all in the same weather system that is steadily and strongly rolling into the Cape also. So that's going to keep moving west. And that's going to almost hit Arno Bozeris as he, of Romain Atanasio, sorry, as he moves through. And like what Pip said in the video, they're going to be just in a whole week of this particular weather. So 25 to maybe gusts of 50 for a week. So brutal sailing to be constantly in those worst of the worst conditions. And for my mind, I think we're going to see some more damages there. Because it's one thing to sail through this for 2 days, maybe even 3 days, but 5 to 7 days of this without letting up, that is a enormous test, both for the sailors, for their stamina, but also for the boat. Because like we also discussed in an earlier video, the thing that really destroys the boat, well, that it destroys anything, is vibration. So the constant knocking and the fact that it just repeatedly keeps going and keeps going, eventually that will just disintegrate anything, right?
Je sais pas si les vagues ça tient. Allez mon pépère. Voilà, tranquille. Au dos mon pépère. Voilà. Et là, bon, je reprendrai des images tout à l'heure, parce que là il va y avoir de la grêle, il va y avoir... mais bon, c'est assez beau quoi. Ça a fait un peu peur, mais c'est bon. Et voilà, il arrive. Il est là, voilà. Il va prendre des risques. Et voilà, là. Oh ma mère. Là. Hop. Voilà, je vous fais pas les images de l'avant, hein, parce que ça, si c'est pas de la... Ça, il y a combien là 47 nœuds. Voilà. Avec de la grêle. Bah voilà mon Pelus, t'auras des images de mer. Et voilà, j'espère que ça va passer ce truc là parce que putain. Voilà, la mer elle est marbrée. Et donc ça fume. Waouh. Allez mon pépère. Ça c'est voilà. Et je rigole pas non plus. Quand je vais calmer. Voilà, on a hâte que ça se passe. Hein. Bon, bah écoute, voilà, j'essaye d'en faire une. De devant. Je sais pas si ça va marcher. Là. Voilà.
And this particular intensity, this much force for so many days, is going to be very heavy to deal with. So we see that most of the boats are in good shape. It's exactly how Pip said, like I'm really focusing on nurturing Medallia through here and just keeping all the systems as good as I can possibly get them and just get myself past there into the Atlantic. And then if we have a day with some less wind, that'll be like a welcome thing, and then we're going to really fix everything, because right now she can't really go outside, spend a lot of time, you know, fixing different things, because the weather is just too extreme for that. But they're all dealing with that. So there is maximum stress on every system and no real chance to fix anything, just to spend a lot of time really thinking about it, really you know, fixing things. You're cold, which also really diminishes your ability to think. They've been sailing now non-stop for, the longest they have, 8 weeks more or less. And so all of that coming together makes this the most stressful point, of course, in the race so far. But with the big amount of boats still going there, personally, I think that we're going to see at least maybe 3 or 4 more significant structural problems show up, because it's just such a long beating, and there's just nothing that man can make that can really withstand that. So it's going to be for them also finding the lighter patches, finding the balance, trying to make sure that the boat gets beat up as little as possible, relatively speaking, and really nurturing the boats through. And I would say also that for the speed, I don't think, like right now, they're all getting to that point where it's no longer about the speed. It's no longer about rounding the Cape first. You can see it with all of them. That spirit was there for a little bit, like, hey, we got good winds now. They had 25 knots, relatively steady for 3 or 4 days, so they're all racing hard. But I think you're going to see over the next few days that all of that is going to go right out the window, and it's going to be, let's survive and get past the Cape, because nobody wants to be there in 6 days of this particular weather. It's very, very extreme. And so, I wish them all the luck in the world to get through there. And yeah, so that's more or less the group all the way up to, Didac Costa, and then after that, of course, we have a lot of them that are still many days away from the Cape. And let's go all the way to the back to the situation of Sebastian. So still very erratic. I wasn't able to get any real updates on the situation there. It seems that he's still fully racing, no intentions to abandon or anything, but also no real update on what the technical situation is there. So I'm going to keep digging for what I can find as far as hard information, but it's all French and it's hard to get a hold of. And so that is the update on that for today. I thought it might be nice at this point in the race to do a little Sea Wolf bet or inside like that. So I have a bunch of Sea Wolf mugs coming in. And so I want to ask you all, with the situation right now, taking into account the allotted time for the races. So we're going to take all the factors. Who do you think at this point is going to win the race? And what is your top 5? And I'm going to ask you to put your top 5 in the comments here below the video. And in the end of the race, we're going to look back at this video and I'm going to look at the top 5s. And the 5 people who are, have it correct, or who are closest to correct, and who pointed the earliest, 5 of you are going to get a free signed by me Sea Wolf mug, white color with the logo on it. Yeah. And so the criteria are: you have it good, or you are the person who is closest. And after that, if there are more than 5 people who are, have it absolutely correct, then I will look at who posted the earliest, right? So that's how we're going to determine the winner. So that'll be a fun game to kind of check, how savvy we are and how good our insights are. Then, cool news for this week. So we talked about the automatic buoys, and interesting how that actually exists. So I've been contacted by some companies that actually create these things, and I'm right now in the process of setting up a little bit of an interview, maybe in the show tomorrow or maybe the day after, where we're actually going to talk about this technology and all of the different possibilities, and looking a bit at the future of sailing races, including, of course, our Sea Wolf crazy idea for a much more complex AC75 course, but also just in general, kind of what are some technical things that are really helping to make races more interesting, and maybe some ideas for what we can do if we have our Sea Wolf meeting to add some elements to that. So to do some more complex things and actually test what the limits of these buoys are. I was thinking, for example, maybe we can do a race where we have a random track. So it'll start with a certain track and we'll sail that upwind, but then once we're almost upwind, maybe mid race, the track will change in some interesting way. I have no sense what exactly the abilities of these buoys are and how much power they have to really radically change their location fast and all this type of details. But I think it's cool to dig into that and get a little bit creative with that. Maybe also, you know, with you all pitching in after that show and making some cool ideas. So look forward to that. And on Thursday, I'm going to do the show from a very cool location. I can't say anything about it yet. It's going to be a nice surprise. But this is going to be very cool. So don't miss the Thursday show. If everything goes to plan, we're going to be with the Seawolves in a very, very cool location that I'm really, really looking forward to. So look forward to that. And yeah, that's pretty much the show for today. So thank you all again very much for watching. Thank you for your great comments yesterday when I showed the gallery. Really nice to see that so many of you really love to, you know, see my normal place of work, let's say. And I hope that you all just have an absolutely fantastic day. So make sure, please give a thumbs up to the video, very important. Put in the comments your top 5 for who you think is going to win this, and any other comments or advice or questions that you have, of course, also very welcome. I always read all the comments, so no worries there, and I almost always try to answer any questions. If you want to know more, go to seawolvestv.com for all the other info and our amazing store, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.